Raider Show on our TV. And boy, I tell you what, I'm glad it's your Raider Show, because after Sunday, now we can only say we only been in there 2 games, right?
Right.
But after Sunday, 500 yards, after 2 games, 1,000 yards given up on defense, I'm very, very, very disappointed, and I'm questioning right now what's going on at defensive end, because that affects the whole football team, special teams, offense, everything.
Agreed, but fortunately for me, Raider fans, I'm a little bit more optimistic than my colleague over here.
Absolutely.
I do understand that the Raiders broke a 65-year record, having the worst defense after 2 games in all of modern-day football. That record was set by the 51 Yanks, not the New York Yankees, but the football Yanks in 51. You don't even recognize them. I don't recognize them either. That's how long it's been since a team came out as flat as the Raiders been the last 2 weeks.
What era did you talk about?
Well, this is the millennium, and it's never been done before, and hopefully we have a new term now. John was telling me before we started the broadcast, if you get over 500 yards, it's considered Keystone Cops. So I don't know if that was Keystone Cops, what we saw at the Coliseum, but it's certainly what the Oakland Raiders that we envision and the coaching staff envisioned for 2016.
Well, let's face it. When the season started, prior to the season start, everybody talked about how much improved the defense was. And I was on board with that, with the new additions with Irvin and different people we brought in, Sean Smith being one. Somebody at this point really missed the boat on that one. But I'm talking to Keith before the game, and Keith is the man that makes this thing happen. But we're talking about a man 6'3", 225. He's going up against Julio Jones, 6'4", probably $190 or whatever. He's not a real big guy. But how do you not jam him at the line of scrimmage? He tried that on Crooks, different situation. You got a speed burner, 1 step, he's gone. 98-yard touchdown. But when you get on Julio Jones, he's a shifty type guy. He's not a guy that's going to run you over. But I watched the play. They showed the replay 3 times. And Rich Gannon, the last person to take us to a winning season, all Julio Jones did was a little arm shiver. It knocked him off his base. By the time he recovered from that, it was too late. It was gone. And you call yourself an all-pro receiver?
Yeah,
I don't see that.
Sean Smith's defense right now reminds me growing up. Because growing up in Oakland sometimes we didn't have peanut butter, sometimes we didn't have jelly. We made peanut butter and sugar sandwiches. We was devoid of jam, right? So that's what Sean Smith is right now. He's devoid of the jam because he ain't hit nobody. You're going to line up right in front of somebody and then let them run away from you, and he's just a shiver or a shake away from being a completion. So I think right now, to be honest with you, I am a little more patient than you, but I would like to see T.J. Carey get back in the lineup and bring in Sean Smith until he gets used to this defensive scheme we're playing the way we used DJ Hayden last year. Because Sean Smith is missing it, like you said, that's 2 weeks in a row. So we're going to have to pick it up on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, all the fans out there know that you don't need this. I do.
Okay.
Especially when I get emotional like I was this weekend. But who's the young kid I'm looking for? Carl Joseph.
Yeah.
And Del Rio came out in the paper today and said, I should have played him more. Why do you have, I realize that he is overseeing everything. He's a head coach. Mm-hmm. I've been there, done that. I understand that role. But you have to be able to tell your offensive coordinator, we'll get to that. This is defense segment. We'll get to that later with Musgrave on that call, 4th and 2. Mm-hmm. But my point is, if you see something you don't like, we got one of the biggest, strongest athletic backs in Murray in the league. Mm-hmm. You got 2 yards to go. And you're not, let's save
it. Oh,
let's save that.
Over
That's
that,
all right.
so.
We'll save it. We'll get back to it. But my point being, if there's something out there you don't like, he's not the defensive coordinator. Norton is. But you got to say, whoa, wait a minute. Put this young kid in there. He can't do no worse.
To get a look at him. You don't get drafted first by an NFL team without being able to play. Granted, he is coming off of a torn ACL. He did that early after the first 4 games of his college career. Also, he was leading the NCAA in interceptions at that time. So at that time, he had 5 picks within the first 4 games of the season. So Carl Joseph is a ball hawk. He's a big hitter in the mode of Tatum and Atkinson, like we talked about before. So I'm ready to see what Carl Joseph can do as well. I think McGill played well in the preseason, but he looked a little bit lost out there during the game last Sunday.
Well, and the reason I brought that up is because sometimes you have to overrule your coordinators. I mean, I don't care what it is. And Belichick, I mean, and I'm not a Belichick guy at all, but I can't take away from his ability to coach his football team. But they all realize that you're the man. They work for you. So if you say, I know you don't, but put so-and-so in there, put him in that spot, I just don't like what I'm seeing. That's what a role of a head coach is supposed to be. And I like Del Rio, don't get me wrong.
Del Rio is a defensive player. He's a defensive coach. So he took some of the calls away from Norton towards the end of the game. Well, what do you expect? After giving up 34 points the first game and Sunday giving up 35 points, it's time to make a change. So we're going to have to, in order to make a change, we're going to have to change some of the personnel. And I think we need to bring in the kid and see what he's made of.
Well, if it's not working, what do they say? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's broken.
Oh, yeah. Well,
not broken.
The Raiders
completely.
are last in the league right now. We have given up an average of 517 yards a game. That's 1,035 yards over 2 games. So it's definitely, we're going to have to make some changes. And it might start, a lot of people are screaming for Ken Norton's already. But let me tell you guys a little something. You guys, like I and like my colleague over here, we need to be a tad bit patient. Here's a little bit of a history lesson for you before you get too carried away. There was a team in 2009 that ended up giving up 800 yards and 80 points over the first 2 games of the season. A little bit worse than what the Raiders have done. That team later went on to win the Super Bowl by beating a team that was undefeated at 18-0 at that time. I'm talking about the New York Giants in 2009. They ended up beating the Patriots in their first 2 games of the season. Their defense was worse in the league, and they rose by the end of the season to the 7th-ranked defense in the league and won the Super Bowl. So Raider fans, don't be so negative about it. The defense historically starts off slow. Khalil Mack, over the course of his 3-year career, the first 3 or 4 games, he doesn't have any sacks any of the seasons. He starts off historically slow. And if you know defense and you know football, you know that there's 3 things that comes in bunches. That's interceptions, that's sacks, and that's fumbles. So they come in bunches. So just be a little patient. I feel like that Jack Del Rio knows what he's doing. He's going to turn the defense around. I believe in Jack, and I believe that we're going to make some personnel changes this week.
Okay, now you're not talking about Jack in the Box. You're talking about Jack.
I'm talking about Jack Del Rio.
I just want to clarify that.
Action Jackson, as they call him now.
Okay. Well, what I read, and we're going to have to get back to this because it's time for us to take a quick break. And you always take us out. I bring us in, you take us out. So you.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We talked about the defense. There was some lowlights. We're going to get to the highlights in the offense when we come back with your Raiders show on our TV.
It was low, but there's no lights to it.
There's some lights there. I guarantee.
And welcome back to your Raider show on RTV with my co-host here, Leonard Stevens, who, there's so many adjectives that I've been trying to figure out, but I'm just going to, the almanac is the best one for me because everything's in that, everything. So the football man, stat man. That's what I like the best, the stat man.
I like almanac. That was a little bit better.
But
I
see,
got a little ring to it.
That's over a lot of people's heads. You'd be surprised.
They might think that that's my handle, DJ Almanac or something like that.
Well, let's get back to, we talked about the defense, and we could do a whole show on the defense after this weekend, no question. But we do have a lot, if there were any highlights, bright lights, whatever you want to call it, it was the offense.
Definitely.
And so my man, Mr. Carr, is now considered to be Mr. Carr. He's no more rookie. I don't care. He's playing like a true professional, and he deserves some, we're talking about Pro Bowl type mentioning at this stage. I know it's only 2 games in, but he's playing, man.
Well, I mean, he's got a great supportive cast right now. I mean, the Raiders right now, we talked about the lowlights, but the Raiders are actually leading the league in yards over the course of the first 2 games of the season. They have 940 yards over 2 games. That's a great average for the Raiders to have. The Raiders are actually behind Carolina, second in total yards rushing. Carolina has 69 rushes for 933 yards. The Raiders have 51 carries for 922 yards. So we're 11 yards behind them. However, the Raiders are leading the league in yards per rush. That means every time we run the ball, we're averaging 6.3 yards a carry. That's 1.5 yards over our closest competitors, which would be Carolina at 4.8. So that means every time we carry the ball, we're running 6.3 yards. So it's not just Carr, not taking anything away from him. The running game is on point. You saw another great run by my boy Jalen Richard. He's my boy now. Jalen Richard, who busted through the middle, was called back. DeAndre Washington, and this was Latavius. He ran hard. I think it's great having these two backs behind him because it's bringing out the best. It's a lot of internal competition within that running back room.
But you also, with that being said, and this is what typically happens because it goes to the guys that get the glory. But let's go to the front, to the line. Man,
car
that
insurance,
offensive line, that offensive line is incredible. And Donald Penn, I watched him really closely this weekend. All of them are playing well, but Carr, he didn't come close to a sack.
That is actually technically, well, I wouldn't call it a sack. He tried to scramble out of bounds, and he ran out of bounds like 1 yard behind.
That's not a sack.
They consider that a sack.
Well, they can
but
call
that's
it what
really
they want
not
to.
a sack because
He
the boy hasn't
hit.
been touched.
That's what
and
I was
that's the
going to
main
say.
thing.
And when you can do that as offensive line, your quarterback's lifespan is
definitely
humongous in this league.
Osamale, he's a Pro Bowler. He's everything, all worth that $26 million that he signed up for because I'm watching him finish plays. I'm looking at defenders getting up mad because he's playing until the whistle blows and they getting up like, why you knock me down? Yeah. He said, because that's what they call me, KO. That's what I do. So I'm really happy to see that he's panning out. He has some great blocks. I mean, the running game is great, the passing game, and the receivers are doing their thing.
Okay.
That leads me to your boy.
You know I love Cooper.
Oh, man.
I mean, I love their receiving crew. Even Wolford, the tight end, is really coming along. I think he has a lot of talent, and he's finally getting some confidence. He led the team in receiving on Sunday, which is nobody would have guessed that with Cooper and Crabtree.
8 catches.
But let me tell you something about Mr. Cooper. You know, tremendous athlete. Mm-hmm. And I thought he took a lot of unnecessary criticism for running out of bounds. But he did not run out of bounds. If you watch the replay, and we elaborated a minute ago about Rich Gannon, he was the one that said they need to look at that. If you watch the replay, the defensive arms was extended, and that it doesn't matter how hard you push a guy. If you caused him to go out of bounds, if you're watching where he's running, he's about maybe 1/2 yard from out, and when he pushed him, he went out and he came back in. But the point is, he didn't go out on his own. And every time they talked about it, they said, well, he went out of bounds on his own. No, he didn't.
Well, the rule is that if you go out by illegal contact, then you can come back in and catch the ball. And clearly, let's show the viewing audience what you were talking about. If you look at the play as the play develops, Carr falls back. Carr fades over. He scrambles. He moves. He fires on the run downfield. You can see Amari Cooper get pushed out of bounds with the arms extended by the defender. He comes back in, makes a spectacular catch, and he cuts zigzags all the way across the field for a touchdown. So clearly, if hitting the receiver beyond 5 yards is illegal, then there it is right there. By the rules, by the NFL rulebook itself, we should have been able to, at the very minimum, have a first down at the point of contact where it was made 5 yards down the field for pass interference.
Or past 5 yards down the field.
Yes.
Yeah. See, and these are the things, and you know, I'm one of those type of guys that I'm very critical of officials, very, because I refereed for a long time. And basketball, not football, basketball, but officiating is officiating. And what I don't like is when you're not on top of your game to make the game better. Nobody looks at officials. You're not out there to be seen. And as a basketball official, we were always taught and always mentioned, you know, they'd come in at halftime for a quick, but then after the game, we'd be in there an hour going over what you did. But the best thing you can ever have said about you is we didn't even notice you were out there.
Absolutely. And my thing is, as you know, John, I played basketball growing up here in the city of Oakland as well. A lot of trophies in that room next door to prove it. But I never let the officiating control the game. When officials would make a call on the court, I just played through it because I found that if I argued back and forth with the officials, I would get it later on down the road. So I'm not one, and the Raiders historically have been the same. I mean, for years we were the most penalized team in the NFL. That didn't stop us from winning. So I don't believe in letting the refs control the game. But when you get into where it's a game-breaking situation and they make the wrong call like they did this last week.
And that's what I was alluding to. I wasn't alluding to how your emotions play into it.
Sure.
What I was alluding to is how they changed the game. And that's what I was disappointed with Jack Del Rio and his staff, every single one of them, even the guys in the booth, because they see it. And for them not to throw the flag and say, we want this reviewed because he was, and all they have to do is see what Gannon saw. The arm, if he's a bump and he goes out, you can say, well, but when you see the arms extended, I mean, and plus, as an athlete, you're running, and you come off one foot to the other, somebody push you, you're going to lose your balance.
Right.
You're either going to fall down or you're going to try to get your, and that's going to take you out of bounds.
Right.
And if you watch the play, that's exactly what happened. I know we're spending a lot of time on that, but the reason that I think we need to is because that changes the whole complexity of the game.
The game's tied right there.
Exactly.
The game's tied. Now, there's something that came up that actually, to me, I feel like we need to address because, you know, well, first, we don't want to forget about the other receivers, too. Crabtree had another good game. You know, quickly, let's go back and take a look at his 4th and 2 conversion for a touchdown. You see on that play, it was a quick snap. Carr took 2 steps back and fired the ball, and there he was in the end zone. He does a little airplane spin. It was a great play. But my point I was trying to make is that the controversial call that we had when it was basically 4th and 2 at midfield. 4th and 2, 7 minutes left in the game, and you have Del Rio. He rolled the dice. It's been working for him. Well, sooner or later, it's going to come back to bite you. In this situation, I'm going to have to put some of the blame on the coaching because we actually saw where it was 4th and 2. We went for it, and we ended up losing that battle. We only got 1.5 yards when we should have gotten the 2 yards. Actually, we should have punted because your boy, Marquette King, had been pinning them back in their own end zone in their own end of the field the entire game and should have trusted the defense.
Well, it goes a little further than that, but we're going to have to take that into the next segment, though.
Okay.
Because we may miss that last segment is potpourri, but right now you got to take us out again.
All right. Well, we'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to finish up with the defensive side of the ball, talk about this Del Rio decision, and look forward to our next game next week against the Tennessee Titans on your Raider Show on our TV.
Back to your Raider Show on our TV. Our TV.
That's right.
When I mention that, our TV, what do you mean our TV? You got a TV? Then it's your TV, but it's our TV. And they don't get it. But anyway, we got to get back to, we've covered so many things. But one of the things that you were talking about right before we left was the big decision made on 4th and 2.
Yes.
So
I disagree with that move. I believe that we should have punted, relied on who now I feel like is one of the top punters, especially in terms of being able to coffin corner kick and be able to pin within the 20-yard line. Marquette King, he had been kicking great all game long. It was 7 minutes and 12 seconds left in the game. It was 28-21 at that point. We were in a 1-possession game. We had 3 times out and a 2-minute warning. If we play some defense,
well, I
see there was a caveat
there.
There's a caveat there.
That's why I didn't interrupt.
So,
but you know what? And that may be the reason why he did it. Because think about it. If you don't get it, you're going to give up the ball at basically 50-yard line. But if you do get it, then you have a chance to score and tie the game. If you kick it off, we haven't stopped them. What ended up happening? Exactly we're down 14.
So I guess that's when you got, like, you playing blackjack and you got a 14.
Well,
what do? You
have to look at what your team has done for the game up until that point. And up until that point, it probably wasn't 500, but it was probably 400.
But at the midfield stripe, you trust your defense because it came back to bite the Raiders hard, whereas they came right down and scored a touchdown, and we were down by 2 scores with 4 minutes left in the game.
Now, I never interrupt you, but you know what you just said? That's what they call an oxymoron. You said you got to trust your defense, but they had just given up a touchdown. That's what I really believe that's the reason that he made the decision he made, because he didn't think we were going to be able to stop them, and we weren't. We didn't.
We couldn't stop them from midfield. But I would have.
We couldn't stop them when they was down on the 10-yard line.
If they would have scored, if they would have got 50 yards and had to kick a punt from midfield,
how many times did they punt?
Well, you know, they scored a lot towards the end of the game.
It wasn't many.
Well, I mean, you never know. I just feel like the odds are you don't give Matt Ryan, who was 28 for 34 in the game, 400 yards passing. You don't give him a shot at midfield with 7 minutes left in the game and you're down by a touchdown.
But if you're tied, you can give him a shot because you know you're going to get the ball back. Even if they score, if we had scored, because we were going to score, if we get which was the play calling with the personnel that they had, I thought was really ill-advised. But we've been moving the ball the whole game just as much as they were moving it on us. We go down, we score, then the score is tied. So if they come back and score, we still...
Well, no? We did score, but they took it away from Amari.
But my point is, if we'd have tied the score in real time, then they come down and score. We still got time to come back and we go to overtime. We do whatever we do. But the whole point is that we didn't have that opportunity, and I really believe that he felt we can't stop these guys, so we got to keep the ball.
Well, I mean,
that can be debated.
I guess it's debatable because again, you're giving Matt Ryan, and we couldn't stop their running game. All they needed was 15 yards to get in field goal range. So if your defense is not playing well, I'd rather take my chances pinning them back in their territory as opposed to giving to them 15 yards from making it a 2-score game with 4 minutes left. Because even if they kick the 3, we're down by 10. So again,
they didn't have to kick field goal because they scored another touchdown.
Yeah, they did. They scored another touchdown, so that made it even worse.
And that's the point I'm trying to make. So let's talk about Tennessee. You know, last week I'm showing, my book, and we're looking at games. And remember I said, well, we should beat Atlanta. And I really thought we should have based on what I saw that Sunday. So that didn't happen. But then when I'm looking at the way unless our defense gets fixed really quick, I'm not looking at anything positive happening. Because if we continue to give up yards in bunches like we have, we're in trouble. I'm just telling you.
Well, I agree. I mean, that's like you said, that just makes regular sense. If we continue to give up another 500 yards and probably break a 2,000-year-old record by giving up 1,500 yards in 3 games, then no, we're not going to do anything. We might as well forget about the season because we won't be able to win too much by giving up 500 yards a game. But I think that we'll have some wholesale changes. But one of the things that we have to do, get better at, the one area where we're not last in the league defensively is against the run. We're 21st in the league against the run. And Tennessee has 2 great ball carriers. We saw that in the preseason. We're going to have to contend with my boy, I can't think of his name right now. So this is my first time getting stumped all year. But DeMarco Murray, it came right back. DeMarco Murray, and then we also going to have to contend with the Heisman Trophy winner, Derrick Henry. So we've got 2 battering rams to be able to ram the ball right down the middle, and we're going to have to make some changes in the middle because we're not getting it done, whether it's Jelly Ellis, whether it's Stacy McGee, or it's the linebacker Heaney or James behind them.
But Heaney you talked about it before we went on the air.
Yeah.
There were 2 places where he was just completely lost, didn't know where he was.
Right, so the point is we're going to have to be able to stop the run, and we're going to have to be able to control the tight end. The tight end killed us against Atlanta. Tight end, all 3 tight ends.
I was just about to say.
So we're going to have that middle linebacker and the linebacker. We might have to not allow Bruce Irvins to rush so much. We might have to have him play like he played at Seattle and drop back in coverage because he can do that too. He's a tremendous athlete. But you will definitely, I guarantee you, you'll see some changes in personnel and scheme this week against Tennessee. Now, the one thing we have to our advantage is that we're not playing against Matt Ryan, a Pro Bowler, 4-time Pro Bowler. We're not playing against Drew Brees, a 9-time Pro Bowler, and arguably the best quarterback in football. We're playing against Marcus Mariota, who you're very familiar with your experience of him being up at Oregon. Not that he's a bad quarterback, but he doesn't have the savvy and experience that those 2 quarterbacks that we face out of the gate possessed.
Yeah, and that's a very very true statement and a very realistic one because he has the talent. He's going to be there if he stays healthy, but it takes experience and going through the wars for years like Matty Ice and Drew Brees have done. So hopefully that'll be something that we can look forward to say that'll give us an advantage. But I'm very disappointed right now. I'm not giving up the ship. I'm just realist about what I see, and when I see defense as bad as we've played. Now you can say the New Orleans game, we played a horrible defensive game. We won, so nobody really exposed it and talked about it. But to go back and play like we played the other day and lose, then if we'd have won the other day, if we'd have won Sunday, they just talked about it.
We still had horrible defense.
But I'm just saying the focus wouldn't have been on it if we had won.
Right, and we should have won, and we could have won, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. So now we got to put that behind us. I know it's hard. I can tell you still got a bad taste in your mouth. I do too. And you know what? It's early in the season, so these are even harder to digest when you lose because you're still right there. So the same thing goes for Tennessee. They're right there. They're 1-1. We're 1-1.
Well, we'll see how the tastes in our mouths are, but we're going to be back next week. For this guy here, Leonard Stevens, I'm John Phillips. We'll see you next week.
Go Raiders.